As we're getting ready to close out 2024 in the last few days of December, we have New Year's coming up on Wednesday, and wanted to kick off some dual bands training using the new iGrid bands indicator. That's part of our iGrid pack, which has been released. So this will be an initial two-part training where I'm allowing both the public and those that are part of the iGrid group who have gotten access to these tools some preliminary training on how I'm using this version of the dual bands and the second version of the iGrid bands. So we're going to have, currently we have the dual bands indicator in this form in our iGrid pack. So this is called the iGrid bands. The second set of bands that I'm adding to the pack will be called the iGrid _ dual bands. So this is the iGrid bands, and then we'll have the iGrid dual bands. We'll have two different sets of adaptive price bands. So these aren't Keltner, they're not Keltner, they're not TMAs, they're not what do you call them? Center of gravity bands. They're not polynomial regression channel or polynomial regression channel. Any of those type of bands. They're not hybrid. Yeah, they're not hybrid Keltners, Bollinger bands, none of that old school garbage. This is all new stuff. Taking my adaptive price bands, giving one version that I've built and used from the past for my group. I love these set of bands in institutional side FX trading, and I brought these to a retail platform for prop trading, first here on NinjaTrader 8, then getting added in Quantower. Or they're added to Quantower. We're just finalizing all the training material and everything for that launch as we get this NT8 stuff out real quick first. So let's get into some of the different ways that I use the bands. There's a lot of different ways I use the bands. The good thing about the dual bands indicator, you completely have multiple axes of adjustability. I have them set up similar to what you would use on some of the older school versions of bands from the FX side. Many people use bands on MT4, MT5, and other platforms back in the day. Some of those bands over the years translated. I built what's called the new algo system in the past. I brought non-recalculating bands that do not repaint to the NT8 platform. I think I was the first one that ever did that way back. I built this type of bands back in 2008 for NT8. This is a newer version. Very much in alignment with what I prefer to use for FX trading, which is more, where I'm in trades on average 4.4 to 4.5 days on the higher time frame, and on the lower time frame, I'm on average in trades 1.8 days. But I think this is a really important set of bands to have for prop trading in the futures market. So let's go talk about, and we do have, multiple axes of adjustability on the main set of bands. This is actually worded wrong. It's supposed to say main grid bands. We're going to clean up a lot of this, which are actually the slower ones, and then the faster bands. So the slower bands are what I call the main bands. And I'm going to change this to main bands. That is the ones you see in the gray. That's kind of framing up the dynamic range of the current market. And then the faster bands help me see what direction is price going within the context of the main band. So we have main bands and fast bands. So some of this verbiage will get cleaned up. So what I look for, like this was coming in, and all this time below is U.S. Central Time. So I'm kind of looking for, do the faster bands go outside of the main bands, which they started to do here? And this has all been plotted on replay data. So no after the fact historical data fill or anything like this. This was all live plotted just exactly the way it would have plotted live. So we have a pierce of the fast bands outside of the main and then a hook. I like to look for that hook on both the upper and lower portion of the fast bands, and that's the area price I would engage as a seller. Let's clean that up a bit. You can see this little hook. See how the faster bands hook downward, the faster bands on the lower side hook downward, a segment on each minimum, after we've had an excursion of the faster bands outside the main bands. So that's telling me the market is currently pressing the upper side of its dynamic range. The main bands keep me in alignment with where is the market's current dynamic range. So not old school range, meaning where are levels and all that. I pay attention to levels, but this is kind of taking it to another level where we have advanced indicators with unique math defining the range of price dynamically on the fly. Okay, so that hook I look for, I can work in some liquidity there on the bar close. Everything is a bar close event. We don't do anything intrabar. The crossing of the faster bands back through the main bands can be utilized as a triggering mechanism on a down closing bar. So those are some aggressive selling area, more conservative selling area. Stop never more than most recent price pivot. What I generally do when I get to the mid band of the main bands, I make sure I'm to break even plus on any stop. I usually take some off the table. And then basically two things are going to happen. Price is going to come up and tag my stop, or price is going to start piercing the outer side of the opposite side of the main bands. And what I'm looking for is price running, and some hook on that. In this case, when I'm short, I'm looking for a hook of the green band. I don't care what the red one's doing. A hook of the green band. If I haven't gotten out already, somewhere in here, I would bail on that trade. So partials out, make some money, stops at break even plus, remainder here. Now this is actually a long trade event. I've had an excursion of the fast bands outside the main bands. That gets my attention. So the nice thing about this, I can just sit on my ass and wait till I get certain types of events to then get in and engage the market. Actually, let's make a little bit bigger one. So when I see touches of the bands, or I'm getting extension outside of the bands, the faster outside the main bands, then I can engage if I want to do outside in mean reversion style trading. So the bands give you multiple types of trading opportunities. So that would be an outside in mean reversion trade, outside in mean reversion trade. So the market lifts, I engage to the long side, stop never more than most recent price pivot plus a few ticks or pips if you're trading FX. Takes a while, and wow, gets me to mid band. Now, I'm not going to wait all the way here and leave all that risk on. As soon as I see this running away from my 1-to-1 level, 1 unit of risk to 1 unit of reward, I see it running away from that. And I'm obviously seeing the main band starting to hook upward prominently. That means a new trend is developing. We had a downward trend. Now a new trend is developing. I'm going to move my stop to break even plus. It's running. I get, I'm at 1-to-1, 2-to-1. I'm going to move my stop up a bit. And then when I tag mid band, the mid band right here of the main bands, I got to take some off the table. Stop should be moved probably to your 3-to-1 area at a minimum. So wherever you got in on the trade, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, wherever your 3-to-1 point, if I've tagged up here, I'm going to move my stop to 3-to-1 reward to risk. And then I'm in it, and I start getting touched the outside of the bands, and I get a hook on that red one. I got to exit the remainder of my trade. So, here's the magic of this approach to trading. I'm only on one type of bar type and one time frame. I could find probably 50 different bar type and time frames where I could get in and do the same thing. Here's the beauty of this. Everybody, I could have 100 different traders doing the same type of trades, all on different bar types and time frames, all having a lot of success, and none of them doing the same thing. So trading a prop accounts, they're not doing the same thing. So I'm not doing the same thing in maybe 20 Apex accounts and 5 TPT accounts as anybody else is doing. So that's some of the limitations of traditional systems. Is if I put it out to the retail trading group, if I have too many people all doing the same thing, now we have some potential for some prop firm saying, hey, what are you doing here? You're doing the same thing as, hey, Chris, you're doing the same thing as John Doe and Billy Bob. And, send us a recording of your trade. We want to see that it's you doing it, not somebody else, or whatever, whatever excuse they come up with to try to disqualify you or deny a payout. So number one type of trading you can do, we'll call it MR, mean reversion trading. Now, I like doing mean reversion trading, especially, let's say there's a key level, the market did a level sweep, I see the faster band touching the main bands, and then I'm getting a hook. That's hooked downward, that's hooked downward. I'm going to engage some liquidity there and put a stop up here, just above most recent price pivot or minimum distance that I would ever use, and take a shot. And she goes to mid-band, takes them off, stops to break even plus, and then I'm sitting in the trade either till the end of the trade day or till we get some profit objective on the day, or we get some trade outside the other side of the bands. So every one of these blue lines is an area where we've gotten a hook after fast bands touch or go outside of main bands. You can also wait for the crossing point. That would be a crossing point, crossing point, crossing point. We did go outside of the bands here a little bit, have a crossing point in here. We had a touch, no go outside there, and so on. So mean reversion trading is one way. A second type of trading is looking for pullbacks and uptrends or kickbacks and downtrends. So let's go over here a little bit. So here's a market that was, the main bands were up. Now the main bands are rotating downward. Anytime I'm getting hooks downward by both sets of bands, and I'm looking to be a seller, I want to be a seller as long as the main bands are pointed down. Ooh, that's an ugly looking line. I want to make sure the main bands are pointed down to be a seller. And if I'm getting a downward hook that's, that you can see visually, like, yeah, it's hooking downward. So right here, the red band, the faster band started to hook downward, and it finally started hooking downward right here. The problem is price right there was around mid-band. I don't like to take a short trade at mid-band. I want to be in the upper area price. I want to be above mid-band. So I sit. The market on the fast bands hooks again. Now I can engage price in this area. Now I like my entry positioning. So entry, stop just above the most recent price pivot or the main band upper side as the most amount of risk you'd ever take. Now I'm in the trade. What I like about this is my entry positioning, I'm in that area of price that is the above the mid band or above to be a seller. If I want to be a buyer, I want to buy below the mid band. So does that make sense? This is the value area to be a seller when the main bands are down. If the main bands are up, the value area to be a buyer is below the mid band. This is a dynamic range. The dynamic range being plotted bar close by the main bands is helping you to see where value areas to be a buyer or seller.